Today is Saturday, August 15th, 2015. It's about 7:20. We have a storm that's lasted. We've had thunder and lightning for about 15, maybe 20 minutes. And this is the water that's coming down across the street from 765 Stockbridge Road. It's coming down within a matter of about 5 minutes. The ponds were full. And I'll continue over toward the place where the water exits down and leaves the culvert to go under the street. This is a 20-minute storm. According to calculations, a 2-year storm should be depositing no water across the culvert. Just continuing on now, just so you see the flow of the water. Coming under the culvert. Now this is really important to recognize, is that the same culvert that the Holly House has used for a number of years has absolutely no water coming into it at all. And this is typically the case. There's very little, if any, water that ever comes. And this is the amount of water coming from the development. And I'm going to go across the street and show you the other side of the culvert in just a minute. Now this is difficult to see. It gets a little darker in the woods, but the culvert is completely full. It's completely full of water coming through, and I will follow through to the farming trail. And show you the extent of the water coming out across the road that my father needed to reconstruct once already. This is now where it's coming through. This is the logging road. It's completely underwater. And if we carried on a little bit further, you'd see the amount of water that's coming down. So we'll just follow this down a little further. And I am in over a foot of water now at least. And this is the water that's pouring out over, causing the erosion. And as you can see, as we move a little bit further down here, the color of the water as we head toward our first pond, the primary pond, is the color of mud. And this pond is usually about, or this stream, brook, is usually about 12 inches wide, and it's barely flowing. It's just from a spring. Just to give you a rough sense of what this would typically be like. And again, in a 2-year storm, it was noted that there should be no water coming across the street. And this was a 15 to 20 minute storm. Again, this is the water. The storm's passed now. Lasted maybe 20 minutes. This is 2 minutes after the last video on the other side of the road. You can see the water continuing to pour. And again, can't reiterate this enough, there is absolutely no water coming to this culvert from the Holly House. All of the water is coming from the development across the street. And it took about maybe 5-10 minutes for this to fill up and start overflowing. This is again Saturday, August 15th, 2015. Might be about 7:25 now. This is the second pond on the property. There was a stake, it's exactly 7:30 actually. There was a stake of about 5 yards in front of me that has now been completely washed out, where we were marking where the latest erosion was. And you can see the extent of the water coming out of this. This is typically a brook that, or a stream that's no more than about a foot or so wide, and and only a couple inches deep. And this is the water where it's coming out from the development. One of the few places that it comes across the street from the development. But it carries down. I don't want to get too close. I don't want to get too close to the edge here, but I'll follow it up.
This, you cut another route,
and you can see where the water directly in front of us is going through that entire mound. It's actually going under that mound of dirt in front of us. I'll walk over that way. Probably being held together by a number of root systems. And then that's where it continues on down to the neighbor's property, to give you a rough sense of what we're looking at. But it is a phenomenal amount of water that's coming off of this at this point. And you can see the extent of the erosion. Somewhat deceiving, but at some parts it's at least 10, 12 feet deep, if not more than that. I'm taking a picture of this. I'm walking over because you can see actually and I don't want to get too close to the edge, but the erosion, the mud is actually falling off that face of that little mound there. But that water is probably 7 or 8 feet wide, and it's just pulling the mud off of the sides of this. And this was the pond. Was a pond. Now it's all overflowed with, or filled over with grass and weeds. But there's nothing left to it because the wall, the secondary wall of the pond, or the wall that held it together, was eroded. And this is where the erosion, where the back wall of the pond used to be. You can see the mud it literally, a huge chunk of it just fell off. Okay, this is about 7:35. We are at our first pond now. This is much significantly higher than it normally is, and you can see it's like chocolate milk, the color of the water, where the erosion has pushed into the pond, which has caused it to fill in. Move forward a little bit more, you get a really clear sense of it, where it gets a little bit lighter up here. And that is the color of the water from a typical storm when it rushes across the street and erodes the walls of the brook. And this is what has, over the last 10 years, been causing this pond and the other one to slowly disappear. That was all water in front of us, which is the high reeds and weeds now, which is filled in with mud. Now the only thing that feeds this pond, it's the same pond, is the spring that is pretty close to that road that cuts across the street from the development on 765 Stockbridge Road. And this is the water that's coming over the pond from the development. Again, it's the only place that water is coming from, is that culvert. And this is usually, just like the other brooks, maybe a foot wide and barely moving. And it is right now causing the path to wash out right in front of our eyes. That right there, just probably an hour ago, was full of, that was part of the path that you can see cuts down between the logs. And this is usually a foot wide, and now it's about maybe 10 feet wide, 12 feet wide. Lastly, we're now on the eastern border of the property. This is the last of 3 outfalls brooks. And you can see the extent of the water. This is where the neighbor's property, you can see where the road is already washed away. It's been fixed once. That's about a probably 25-foot gap from here to the other side, and the water coming down. Now all 3 of these outlets end up in the neighbor's pond. I'm going to continue on down to Church Street and show you where from the neighbor's pond they go across Church Street, which eventually leads to Fairview Street and then on to the Housatonic River. But this is just a spring-fed brook, and this is what we're dealing with. It's probably at its peak, maybe 15 feet wide here. It's not usually more than maybe a foot, maybe 2 feet wide.